see. Hey, Gary. Good to see you.
Oh, same to you, Tim.
I did press to record just now. That's okay, right, Gary?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And just to kick this off, again, I want to say thank you, Gary, for joining us. I know Ali told you kind of what we were doing. Dr. Shukla is a professor at Chapman University. The university was recently endowed with a grant, and he's the chair of it. He's an old friend from junior college. I eventually finished college and went on to get a job at McDonnell Douglas, and he stayed in academics, but he taught operations management, and he still teaches operations management. And the whole idea of what we're doing today, and you're besides Ali, you'll be the first, is to share some of our experiences about working in operations management, production, manufacturing, supply chain, that kind of thing. And because a lot of the kids coming up today in college, our kids, our grandkids, a lot of them think that the best thing is to have a career in at Google or X or Facebook or something like that, you know. And the idea is to share with them some of our experiences, so they can see that there is other things to do in the world. So I've got a series of questions. Granted, these are just proposed. We'll start with these, but I know some of the key of what you want to share is some of your highlights of your career, like the 717 line and putting in the moving line and things like that. So, but we'll start off with and I guess we should start with introduction. I'm Tim Engel. I used to be a senior manager at Boeing, and recently retired after working as a quality specialist for a number of years, but long career. And Gary, do you want to do a little intro of yourself?
Yes, my name is Gary Jordan. I hired in with McDonnell Douglas back in 1977, and I retired in 2020 after a 43-year career. And as you may or may not know, McDonnell Douglas transitioned into becoming Boeing in the 90s. And so I had a long illustrious career there. And you know, should I start out on where I started when I hired in, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great.
Okay, so I started out, I hired in as a Drive-Matic operator. And what that is, it's a machine that automatically drills and installs rivets and putting two pieces of material together. So I started out there kind of like right at the ground floor. And then after about a year of that, I was union. I was part of the UAW when I hired in. But after about a year, my management saw value in me going around throughout the plant and identifying more work to put on the Drive-Matic machine. So they made me what was called a manufacturing specialties coordinator, and I proceeded to go across throughout the plant and identified work and brought it on to the Drive-Matics, because doing things automated through a Drive-Matic was a lot quicker than having two people doing manpower, drilling and shooting and bucking a rivet. And so it was a time saving. So that's what I did. So I did that for about a year. And then I went into management. And my first management opportunity was being the manager over all the Drive-Matics. And in building 12 at that time, which is where the DC-10 and then later the KC-10 was being produced. And then eventually throughout the plant in other buildings as well. So after doing that for a while, then I went into production and became a manager in production. And I was over, a lot of the sub-assembly areas on the DC-10 program, and then progressed into moving over to the MD-80, MD-90 program. And that was, that happened sometime around the 1980s. And so I spent a lot of time, in the production environment and around a lot of the, the major models, DC-10, KC-10, MD-80, MD-90. And then around 1990, I went from the production world. I went to the other side, which was quality. And so I went into quality. I went in as a manager, and that's where my real journey began, becoming a quality manager. And so I ended up doing that, on the Indy 80, Indy 90 program. And that actually took me all the way into when we started the 717 program. And so I got in on the ground floor of that program. And at the very beginning, we were building a 717 just like any other product, the MD-80, MD-90 at the time. It was going down a line, moving down a line used by the use of tugs. And so at one point in time, the leadership on the program, they started going out and doing benchmarking tours. They went to different car manufacturers, and Toyota being one of them, and they saw this thing called a moving line, and they said, you know what, we want to bring that same concept back to Long Beach, and we want to bring that to the aircraft manufacturing, which was never done before. It was unheard of. It's like, that's impossible. You can't do that. Well, we can all now look back and say, well, it was possible. And it really was a good program, starting with digging a gigantic hole right down the center of our hangar and putting in a chain links that each link on the chain was like 1 foot. And it's went the length of the whole building and stuff. So it was really quite amazing. So that's kind of like, where the beginning. And I don't, if we want to go into, carry on with that story, Tim, I'm happy to do that as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, so you've covered a little bit of your history, which is really amazing, and we've been so blessed to work for that company. I know I feel the same way. I had the same number of years as you, Gary, 43 altogether, which just blows me away. But what do you think was key to your success? I mean, what were some of the things that you brought to the job that was instrumental in getting you moving and promoted and moving in from like initially production and then into supervision, and then you just went along with your career? And we'll come back to the the moving line in a minute. But
okay.
Can you explore some of that?
Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of reflecting back on what you're talking about, and I don't know how it happened. Maybe it was some of the different training that the company put us through. They put us through a lot of lean training. They put us through Six Sigma, and so during these different training sessions that the company put us through, I picked up a little pieces along the line. The number one piece that stuck with me from the very beginning, the very first time I heard it, was this phrase that I'll share with you. And I took this phrase and I put it up on my wall everywhere I went. When I went to a new area, this thing was hanging on my wall. And what the phrase was, you may or may not have ever heard of it, but the phrase is, none of us is as smart as all of us. For some reason, that resonated with me, and I took off and running with that. And I said, that's going to be my philosophy for the rest of my life, that none of us is smart as all of us. So what does that mean? So one of the other modules, that we got into was a thing called a disc profile. For those of you who've never heard of a disc profile, the D in the disc represents the personality traits of a person. The D represents, a person that, is kind of like a dominant type person. The I is a person that's more influential. The C portion of it is a person who is conscientious. And then the S is a person who's steady. And if you really look into these principles of the disc profile, you'll learn that you can't have a team of all Ds. That's all dominant people. And
right.
you can you can't ever reach consensus with a bunch of dominant people. You got to have some conscientious people, steady, influential. You got to have a combination of everything. And if you're lucky enough to get a combination of all these things, that's when you'll be at your strongest point. So I want to talk about the none of us is smart as all of us again. I just want to give an example. Nobody knows the answer to everything. So you could have a complex issue come up, and I don't, most people don't know the answer to everything. But if you take one person and you put them in a room with 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 other people, chances are when you're faced with a problem, somebody in that room might have the answer, or they might have a comment that might lead to the answer. And you have to understand that when you become a manager, you have a choice. You can be a manager that turns around and manages by, being a dictator, or you can be what I like to call a better term is a leader. A leader has always been taught to me that a leader is somebody that people want to follow. A manager is not somebody that people want to follow. A manager is somebody that is the exact opposite. So a leader is what I wanted to be, because I wanted people to follow me. And so my management style was more of a consensus. It wasn't I'm the manager and this is the way it's going to be. I managed by consensus. And I did that all the way up to the last day that I worked with the company. So those are some of the attributes that I think that helped me along the way.
That's excellent. That's excellent, Gary. That's stuff. I mean, I remember years. I don't know when it was that you adopted that. That was early in your career, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I know later what we continued to focus on over there on C-17 years later, after 2001 when you retired, was we talked about employee involvement. We talked about leading by consensus, teamwork, collaboration, which is exactly what you're talking about. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
that's great stuff. And before we go back to the moving line, I wanted to go back again. Now, when you hired in, was it 77, you said?
Yeah, 19 October of 1977.
Was there anything special that either you did to prepare, like education wise, or anything like that, or were you just fortunate you were able to get in with a high school education, or how did that work out?
Yeah, it's crazy looking back on it. When I graduated from high school in 1974, and I went to Orange Coast College, afterwards, because that's just what everybody was doing. They're going to either Orange Coast or Golden West. I grew up in Orange County, obviously,
right.
And so that's what everybody did. So I did the same thing. And as I was doing that, I was just working, different jobs. I mean, I did everything from being a dishwasher at Orange County Medical Center, which is now UCI Medical Center, to selling car insurance for Montgomery Ward's Forum car insurance. And to landscaping. I was a landscaper for a while.
Oh.
But there came a point in my life, it's like, I got to start getting serious and start a career. So at that particular point in my life, it's like, well, let's see, should I go join the military? Maybe that's where my path should lead me. Go there and then figure it out from there. Or do I try to go get a job with a big company? And McDonnell Douglas at that time was a big company. And so that's what led me to it. I was lucky enough. I got an application, I put it in, and lo and behold, I get a phone call from a guy at HR at McDonnell Douglas, and he said, "Can you come in for an interview?" And I came in for the interview, and next thing you know, they were hiring me, and so I came in basically with a high school education and some college. Now, I will say, because of the greatness of the company, the Boeing company, I actually went back to school and got my bachelor's degree while working for the company, because the company was so gracious and stuff. Is one of the great things about them was they were really, behind people getting their degrees and such. So that's what I did is I went back and got my degree while working at the same time, full time. And so that helped me. That school, that education of going back to college and everything, it happened at a time in my life where I took things a lot more seriously, and it really helped me. It helped me improve, at work as well. So
That's great. I know I had the same experience. I basically came in with an AA degree, and at the time, I think I was working for Joe Lombardo. I don't know if you remember Joe.
Yeah.
He was a great guy, good leader. What I remember, one of our leaders at Boeing called him a world beater, and he was great. And he kind of took me under his wing for a little while, and I signed up and finished my education like you did, with the help from Boeing. It was so great, great opportunity. So if you want now, would you go? Can you go back to the moving line story? Yeah. Okay, cool.
So some of the things that we did when we started the moving line, we actually developed some really cool processes and such. The very first thing, believe it or not, was the understanding that we wanted the mechanic to become the surgeon. What does that mean? Well, the mechanic before, they would run from the airplane and they would go get their parts. They'd go all over the place to go get parts. They'd need a tool. They'd run all over the place to get a tool. And we said, no, we have to treat the mechanic like the surgeon, and we need to bring all that stuff to them. So as the moving line was developed, it was, by the help of some very talented people, they determined at what station does everything need to get done. And so they determined this, and at these different stations, they created staging areas. At those staging areas, they went in, that's where the parts were that needed to be put on the airplane when the airplane was going down the moving line at that particular location. The parts were the tools. The company went out and made a huge expenditure for these big, gigantic rollaways that were filled with tools. So the mechanic didn't have to go searching around for a wrench or a screwdriver. It was all right there. It was right next to it was right, So, and then certified equipment, instead of going to the tool crib and getting a piece of certified equipment, the tool crib attendant came out to these big toolboxes and grabbed them and made sure that they were always certified. So we always had certified equipment. The operating instructions that the mechanics worked to, the drawings, everything was brought to the mechanic and stuff. So he wasn't wandering around looking for, stuff. So go ahead. I'm sorry, Tim.
Oh, no, I just say you're right. I mean, it makes so much sense.
Yes. And so that was number one. So number two, there was a couple of things that we created, and we use this mindset of, I know this is kind of a funny word, but we use a mindset of poke yoke. And that's a Japanese term. Once again, it was learned in one of the classes that I attended. But what it means is it translates into mistake proofing. And so we wanted to make everything so that it was mistake proof. So just to give an example of a couple of items that, that are in our everyday life, all of our everyday life, where somebody has taken this same principle and mistake proof it. Like, for example, if you open up a microwave when it's running, it stops so that you don't get harmed. If you open up a wash machine, you can't open up the lid when it's running so you don't get harmed. The dryer shuts off whenever you open it up. Cars now have these new great sensors that are all over them. And one of them is kind of cool, where if there's a car in front of you, it'll automatically slow the car down, because you might have fallen asleep, who knows? But anyway, these are examples of mistake proofing that we, if you take that to an airplane design world, you might want to design a part that perhaps it can't be installed in any other way but the correct way. So that's something that the design engineers would be looking at.
Right.
As far as the operating instructions, they used to be kind of confusing. The mechanics would look at them and it would say, you know, build this per blueprint and DPS, blah, blah, blah. So, you know, a lot of us, when we buy something from, you know, Home Depot, we'll get it and we'll have to put it together. And a lot of times you open up the box and stuff and there'll be a picture of what the product, you know, exploded views of the product, and it'll be a picture of what the product looks like completed. So we incorporated that. We called it standardized work. And so we took the operating instructions and we put photos of what the work was supposed to look like. The mechanics still had to build it per blueprint and type design. They still had to use all the proper processes and certified, but at least they had a picture of what that product would look like in its complete stage, which is very helpful for if you're in that position.
Yes.
We did the same thing with our non-conformances. Unfortunately, as you're building a product, there's going to be a time that comes when something happens, a deviation happens, and then you document it on a non-conformance. Then you have to have the engineer come in and give a disposition on, you know, how to repair that particular area. What we did is, because on the non-conformance document, we found that a lot of times the mechanics sometimes had a challenge of describing what the non-conformance was in words. And so what we did is we developed a means of taking a picture of the non-conformance, and we spent a lot of time, we bought a lot of cameras and we taught the inspectors how to take pictures, how to put them on, attach them on the computer in the system so that the engineers could see it as well. We taught them how to edit the pictures, to draw, you know, to put little arrows and little boxes and say, and because, you know, the old saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. That was our philosophy. We took pictures because those pictures were worth 1,000 words, and it really helped the engineers see a lot better of what they were dealing with. So that was another area that we developed, and it's in any organization, the most important person that you're trying to take care of is the customer. So on that program, we developed a customer cab, and these customer cabs took all of the delays and cancellations that happen at the airlines. So for any reason at all, we had access to them. We had access to all the airlines' maintenance logs, and we had access. In the cabs, we would take a look at all the delays and cancellations and all the maintenance log items. We look at every single one. We were looking for systemic issues. And if we identified a systemic issue, we didn't wait for the customer to say, hey, go fix that. We identified a systemic issue and we got on it. And we started, you know, if we needed to redesign something or whatever we had to do to make that better, that's what we did as a result of that cab that we created.
Just a quick comment on that to explain to the audience that might be seeing this in the future. The CAB is a corrective action board, correct?
Yes. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay. No worries. No worries.
I got to be careful with acronyms.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Gary. Sorry.
So another thing, you know, that we created was a thing called concurrent inspection, which was unfound of in the industry, because normally, you know, a mechanic does a job and they put it on the board and on this call board, and then an inspector will log in on it and then he'll go to the job. So what we did is we wanted to try something different where we had an inspector living with the mechanics all day long, instead of the inspector going back and forth and going, you know, and bouncing all over the place. We assigned inspectors to crews, and we said, we want you to live with that crew all day long, and we want you to continually inspect. So that way what we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that the quality was being built into the product instead of being inspected into the product. And so that's what we call concurrent inspection. So one of the challenges was, well, how do you do that? An inspector probably could become complacent, after a period of time. And so that was a legitimate concern. So how we address that is we rotated them. We rotated the inspectors so that they were always, in a new area, learning new parts of the airplane and being in there inspecting right along with the mechanics while they were building it, so that we ensured that we had good quality going on all the time. Anyway, that's some of the things that we developed on that program that were very beneficial and stuff. That some of the stuff they took and used at our main company up in Seattle. Not all of it, because up in Seattle they're a lot bigger than we were. We just had one airplane in production on the production side. Of course, there was the C-17 over on the military side as well. But on the production side, we got down to just one product, the 717. So we were able to really do some special things on that program that I thought there was a lot of value added things that could be shared with others, in the future. And that's what I hope we're kind of doing right now, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the things you described, if the company was lazy or complacent or just ready to go out of business, they wouldn't have they would not have invested in those things, because it all costs money. It takes time. And it's amazing that became part of our culture. It seemed like when I hired in a little after you. Came in 79. And it seemed like there was always part of our culture was continuous improvement, sort of like the Toyota model. There was always, we were always looking for ways to improve our processes, because we knew that there was competition out there, be it Airbus or Lockheed or whomever, so we had to get better continually, or we would not survive. So those are all great examples. We adopted some of the same things. Sometimes they had slightly different names over on the C-17 side. I left the commercial side in the early 90s. I think it was right about 93, and I went over to C-17. But yeah, all excellent stuff. So you guys got the moving line working too, didn't you? I mean, it was up and running for a while, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah, it probably ran for the last somewhere around 2000 to 2005 time frame. But I also want to mention, you hit on something, Tim, with the continuous improvement. I thank you for bringing that up, because that is another one of the big points. In fact, with my the people that work for me in the salaried world, on their performance reviews, that used to be one of the things that we always discussed during a performance review was continuous improvement. We did not want to stay the same all the time and just be happy with the way things are going. If we saw something, a process or whatever we were doing, we always took a look at it and said, is there a way we can make that better? And that's the mindset that any manufacturing organization has to have. You can't just be okay with, hey, everything's working, everything's fine. You always have to have the mindset of, what can we do to make that even better? Because you got to move forward. You got to keep moving forward and continuously improve. And thank you for bringing that up. That's a very
absolutely. I remember there were times, and I'm sure you do too, that we had programs in place where if you put in a suggestion, that you could even get a percentage of the savings.
Yeah. I got in. I was involved in some of those very things myself, and it was kind of cool.
Yes.
The employee suggestion program. It was a great thing.
Yes. So we
want the mechanics are the ones are the experts. They're the ones who know better than anybody, how to make something better. And by all means, that's what we wanted to get their input on everything.
Yeah, I remember at one point we started what we called, and you guys may have done the same thing, EI, Employee Involvement Program.
Mhm. Mhm.
And on C-17, the leader of that was Ed Chenille. I don't remember all of his background, but anyway, the employee involvement and it gets back to what you said in the very beginning. You know, none of us is as smart as all of us. That whole idea, you might think we're never going to fix this, never going to fix this, and like, did you ever think about talking to the mechanic? You know, the guy
Yeah.
that's the guy or gal that's putting it on the airplane or installing it, or and all the rework and repair that's going on involved with that installation or whatever. Yeah, that's great stuff. I was just going to look back over a couple of the questions and see if we hit most everything. You talked about some of your highlights and your achievements and the moving line and so forth. Are there any like lessons learned that you'd want to share with people that are, looking forward to a potential career in operations like we had? Any lessons learned or that kind of thing that you learned along the way? I know you touched on some things.
Yeah, it's I wish I would have had someone to listen to like we're talking right now, early on, to
Mhm.
help point me in the right path, down the right path. Um, I learned it from going to different training and such, and then just having an open mind on everything is how I learned stuff. But some of the lessons learned is you have to have a mindset that when you're in a manufacturing environment, that you have to have a procedure, you have to have procedures that you have to work by. And and if you develop a procedure, you work to that procedure, and if that procedure doesn't work, then change the procedure, change it
Yes,
to something that will work.
yes,
Because at the end of the day, um, you have to produce a repeatable product, and you just have, it's got to be the same good quality every single time. And the best way to do that, especially if you have a change in personnel, is you have to have good procedures, and you have to have everything written out exactly how it has to be done correctly. And that's why I said, if you have a problem with that, you can't work to that, then change it. So uh, another thing that I learned, I know this one's kind of crazy, but and Tim, you might be able to appreciate this, but when you're talking to people, when you're talking and having a conversation with subordinates, or even your higher ups, talk in understandable language. I you know I don't know how many times I've been involved in conversation with people, and they say a bunch of stuff, and I walk away going, what in the world did they just get done saying? I have no idea. and,
yes,
and
yes,
so my message is, we bring your language down to a level that everybody understands, because really nobody's impressed when you use a bunch of big words and technical terms. Nobody's impressed by that. They're more
right,
impressed if you use words to where they understand, and it leads to less confusion. And
yes,
then and then finally, I'll say once again, back on the customer. The customer is that's why we're here. It's because of
yeah,
the customer. So customer satisfaction surveys, when you complete a product, ask your customer when he receives the product, ask him at different points of time, how did you like our product? And is there anything we can do to make it even better? um,
yes,
that
excellent,
goes that's future sales. I mean,
yeah,
that's why we're here, is to keep future sales going on. And the best way to do that is to keep the customer happy. And the only way to keep them happy is to let them know that you care,
yes,
about what's going on.
yes. That's great. No, that's great stuff, Gary. Excellent points at the end there. I agree with you 100%. You're absolutely right. The customer interface is so important. Um, we were with the C-17. We were mostly dealing with Air Force for the most part, and we knew how. And that DCMA office, the Defense Contractor Management Agency, that was so important. We treated them like they were the guys that were going to take the keys and go fly that airplane, you know? So,
Mhm.
but absolutely right. Gary, I can't thank you enough for participating in this. It's amazing that our time is just about up. I really appreciate your involvement, and really thank you so much for being involved. And you know, we'll hopefully this is kicking off a really good thing, and the project will be a success. Thank you so much for your time and your devotion to this overall project. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're very welcome, Tim, and I appreciate it. And this is a great experience, and I hope we can share it with a bunch of people.
Yeah, it's for Chapman University, but also potentially other kids that are going to school and looking forward to a career in operations. So
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm sure it'll be very useful. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for your time.
All right. Thank you, Tim.
Okay,
Take
take
care.
care. All right, you
Okay.
too. Thanks, Gary.
Bye.
Bye now.
Bye.